Okay, so here we have an elm, and I'm going to show you the safest way I know to cut trees off like this. This is something I've been doing for 35, almost 40 years now, so it's a lot of experience. This isn't something that you can start doing and become very good at overnight. You start subtle, you start small, you start with the simple stuff and work your way up. The saws are very unforgiving. They don't cut you, they remove. They put a groove in you. So I think it's just like driving down a highway. If you just keep that mentality that you have to be alert, you'll be fine. So we cut away the little junk around the bottom that gets in the way so you're not stumbling over stuff. Clear yourself a path. Decide which way you want to drop them. This one, it looks like the best way would be maybe that way. So we're going to make a notch and show you how I cut them off. And now, the bigger the tree, the more critical it becomes. This is a smaller tree, you don't want to make too big of a notch. You only cut in about the third of the way to even only a fourth of the way sometimes. But the key is to have this angle meet exactly with that angle. And on a larger tree, it's more important. I didn't quite get them perfect, but anyway. So what I like to do is cut the tree off up a little higher where you're more comfortable cutting, and the tree's just a bit narrower there. Have it fall and either get it out of the way and then come down later. And I like to take everything away as I possibly can and cut them as low to the ground as I possibly can without hitting the dirt or anything like that. And a lot of times we don't have to do any grubbing or anything then. We just come over it with our bush hog. Yeah, I'll be kind of careful, but I'm able to straddle a lot of the stumps that way. And if they're small enough, I try to take them right to the ground, but it takes a lot of experience to be safe doing that when you got the whole tree attached. As you can see, nice clean cut for the forest. Grass and other things will come back growing around it. We don't have to disturb the good soil that's in here or anything, or very little of it if we do. Now the only thing about this is now, like we like to cut stuff off, delimit, and we come with our grapple and grab our large piece and take it out in the clearing somewhere. Well, then we end up with a small chunk left behind it we may have to carry out. So that's the only downside to it, but it's a safe way to do it. Now there's a prime example of how you could get seriously hurt. You see that stump bounce up in the air, and sometimes they'll roll, and they'll roll to you. You run away, but you may not be far enough. It'd be like getting hit with a sledgehammer. And when these kind of lean a lot, or they're bent or crooked, or they go over a bank, that's the worst kind. a little cleaner. So your hinges, and it don't matter how steep this is. Now this is going to be a firewood tree, so we don't worry about how big of a notch we put in. If this was a veneer log, we want to save more of the tree and not use so much of it for the notch, but you get the idea that the hinge has got to be where it comes together. And then now we're going to do what they call the saber cut, and it prevents a leaning tree from splitting open. Now it doesn't always work 100%, but if this was a veneer tree or something you want to saw lumber out of, you don't want this to crack part way up through, and then you ruin so much of the good lumber. And it's a way to do it to try to prevent some of that from happening. So we'll see if we can get this one right. Okay, that's what we call a plunge cut. So we're going to get maybe where there's only about 2 inches here between this cut and this cut. And we're going to try to match it from the other side because my bar ain't long enough. And then we're going to cut all the way back. Maybe so maybe we got maybe 4 inches or so there. And then what you do is you come from the back side and you just nip that. And then when the tree falls, it's completely able to hinge over, not be partly attached yet and rip open. So. I'm guessing I matched up pretty close. I might be within a 1/2 inch, which should be okay. So now I'm going to come from this side. And it's leaning. There's a lot of top on this tree. So when it goes, it's going to be like a little bit of an explosion. Now see here, this is a miniature version of what can happen sometimes. Sometimes these splits are way up here. Now it pulled a good chunk of your veneer out. So then when you saw this log, you have boards that have pieces missing and that end up being wasted. And then you look at my hinge here. For a guess, not too bad. You don't want to make this too narrow. Especially on a really big wide one like this, they will come off. But those little splinters, that didn't hurt nothing, and I didn't match up too bad. But the key is to come off of this and come around. That way, as your eye, it's hard. It's hard to see. So you get in there pretty close. So you're real close to your hinge. Sometimes you want to be above it by about 1 inch or 2. Depending on how big the tree is, how much it's leaning. Now there too, we have to be careful cutting them up. We start taking limbs off. He wants to roll, and there's always something to be looking out for.